Okay, so welcome. I think most of you know me. I'm Bev Waters. I work for PAXis, and I'm also a national trainer. And what we decided this would be a good time to do a little bit of PAX with the older kids. And when we talk older kids, typically we say fifth through high school, and it can be definitely fourth graders also, right? But we're looking sort of at that teenage brain a little bit and how it varies a lot from our adult brain and even from the real primary kids. But we thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about it and give you some information. I want to preference this by, this isn't my normal way I teach, obviously. I usually do a lot of active participation, so it's kind of hard, but I'm just going to run through the slides. Feel free to interrupt, and if somebody's monitoring the chat room for me, if there's a question that comes up while we're going, I'd appreciate it. But what we're going to do, I'm going to pull this up here, get this ready to go. And I'm going to see if I can get this to work. Sure, it's not coming on. There we go. But that's not my first slide. I'm gonna go to okay. So we're talking about PAX with the older kids. And what we want to do, particularly now, I mean, some of you can pass some of this on to teachers as well. This really is PAX for the classroom. I'm not really talking about PAX at home. However, a lot of these same principles will apply to what some of these parents might be going through right now at home with their kiddos. And PAX with these older kids, what we're trying to really do is bring that peace, productivity, happiness, and health into the classroom or into all of the classrooms, the school, the whole community. And I've chosen to do 4 different kernels, vision and cues, vision, PAX, quiet, toodles, and granny wacky prizes, because those are the ones I think that we have to adjust the most out of all the kernels and cues with PAX. Some of them you don't have to change at all for the older kids, but these we change a little bit, not a whole lot, but just our way of maybe presenting them and talking about them. So the first one, I don't know why this isn't really advancing, so we're going to do it here. So first we're going to I wanted to just touch briefly on the brain. I've done actually quite a bit of research with it, but we know that prefrontal cortex is much more immature in teenagers as compared to adults. And that prefrontal cortex, that's the thing that in us that allows adults to have that impulse control. It allows us to be able to organize. That's the decision-making part of our brain. It allows you to prioritize, like what's most important, what's to least. It inhibits that inappropriate behavior, and it initiates appropriate behavior, and it's that empathy. So what we see happening is for adults, most adults that are mature, they're able to have impulse control because that prefrontal cortex has been developed. However, we know that in the youngsters, the adolescents, while that prefrontal brain is developing, that's that emotional part of the brain. So sometimes we see teenagers, anywhere from even 12-year-olds on through 22-year-olds, not really knowing how to make decisions properly. And sometimes they use empathy rather than being rational when they make decisions. And so you've probably seen that where kids, you're like, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? Well, basically they weren't really thinking because their brain isn't fully developed yet. That prefrontal isn't quite there yet. And so that takes over. And this is also the time where those connections in the brain are still not thoroughly developed, and their brain is going through this pruning process. And so while it's going through this pruning process, it's still developing, and different areas are still developing, and not always at the same rate. So in the teen's brain, the connections between the emotional part and the decision-making part are not really set for all teenagers. Some you see have a lot more rational brain than others. Good example of that was just a few months ago. I was in New Mexico. I got a call because one of my friends, her teenage daughter, wasn't home from school yet. She had called. She had asked if she could go to watch wrestling practice. Mom says no. So she's upset about it. So she is not thinking quite right. Her emotional, she's mad, she's upset. She finds money, gets money, takes a bus to a friend's to get it to a friend. They'd get in a car with a stranger to go move in with her dad. Made all these decisions just based on her emotions. Like what 13-year-old would just get in a car with the strangers? We've taught that. Don't get in cars with strangers. Don't talk to strangers. But they're just not rational. And I'm sure some of you have probably come across situations where, like, why would you do that? Why would you try to put out that candle with a Kleenex? I'm not sure what you're thinking there, you know? But what's happening is it's really not their fault. It's just their brain isn't fully developed. So we know that when their brain's not fully developed, a lot of other things happen, especially if they're, when we talk about trauma and we talk about those 6 principles of trauma, those kiddos and those kiddos have safety issues. They have that trustworthiness and transparency. They need that peer support, the collaboration. All of those 6 principles come into effect when we talk about these kids that have experienced trauma and abuse. And what happens when they've experienced this trauma and abuse and other things that contribute to their brain, certain parts of their brain, if they've gone through trauma, we won't grow as fast. So they'll have certain parts of their brain that are weakened because this is this growth spurt of their brain. And if they're very stable and have support and they come from a very thriving, nurturing environment, their brain is really strong. But some of the pieces of trauma, when it affects their brain, it can weaken them. And we know that, and I put this in red because this is really, really important for you to know, because long after safety, so long after they've come into your classroom and they feel safe or joined a soccer team or are at church and they have that safe spot, the coping mechanisms used to survive traumatic experiences still remain. What that means basically is even if they feel safe, if they get triggered, they still can go into that fight, flight, or freeze mode, where you might see that happening. You might see this child that's really been doing well and they've experienced a lot of trauma at home, and then all of a sudden they just shut down in your room and you're like, what's going on? And what happens is their brain just recalls. It's that PTSD, right? It just recalls what happened. Although you're providing the safe environment for them, the coping mechanisms still remain. And so that's why we have PAX. We have PAX to bring in those strategies, those kernels to help them regain and know how to, not just know how to cope, but have these other skills. The 3 things that when you as partners and you as teachers, while you're doing kernels and cues, these are the 3 most, to me, these are the 3 most essential things that those kiddos should walk away with. And you might want to write these down because I think these are really, really important. So after you do kernels and cues, or while you're doing them, we know that those kernels and cues are focusing on self-regulation, right? So when you do Granny Wacky Price, they have to self-regulate. They can start, but then they have to self-regulate to come back and calm down. When you do the harmonica, they have to self-regulate to stop when you blow the harmonica. When you do PAX leader, they're learning how to self-regulate to deal with each other, how to push in their chairs. It's everything not okay. Everything you do with PAX is really looking at self-regulation. And if we can get those students, those kiddos, to be able to self-regulate, what a difference it will make when they go to a restaurant, when they join a team, when they're in a classroom, wherever they are, because they know how to self-regulate. I talk about this a little bit because I taught school for 35 years and I loved it. And I had really good rapport with my kiddos. And so I would say my classes were really, really, they were really good. I didn't have trouble with them. But you know what? I was really good at managing my class. But when I wasn't there and I had a sub, it was a disaster. It was terrible. I was so disappointed because here I am. They're really good for me. I have a good rapport. They do what I ask them to do, but I never taught them how to self-regulate. And so, these were high school kids. And I see it in junior high. I see it in elementary. A sub comes in and it's a disaster because they don't know that self-regulation piece. Or as parents, you go out and you have a babysitter and the kids, they do everything that they shouldn't do. And they're like, what's going on? Or you take them into a restaurant and they don't know how to behave because they haven't been taught self-regulation. So we owe it to our students and our own children to bring in the self-regulation piece, and the kernels and cues do that. And so while I was a good teacher, I thought I didn't teach them self-regulation, and that was really not to their advantage. And now we know. And so that's the first thing. So whenever you walk away from partnering and you walk out of your classroom, think, what did I do today to help them learn how to self-regulate? Then the other thing I think you really owe it to the students is when you teach these kernels and cues, we're teaching behavior as a skill set. So, right, you're really strong at teaching them math and social studies and science, and we teach them those academics. But again, we owe it to our kiddos to teach them behavior. Just as we teach our academics, we need to teach behavior. So at the end of the day, analyze and say, so I taught them we did stuff with self-regulation. How did I see that they're learning self-regulation? And how can I tell that they're learning that behavior is a skill that they're in control of? Right? Because they, as older kids, you can tell them that. You can talk. I even talked to the first graders about it. And I think, Jocelyn, you were probably with me. We talk to them. Why are we doing this? Your brain, this is your brain doing stuff. And so with those older kids, you need to learn how this behavior, this is something you need. You need to know how to self-regulate for interviews, for job interviews, when you're taking tests, when you're babysitting, when you're on a soccer team, whatever you're doing. And that self-regulation, that's behavior as a skill set. So ask yourself, did my kids come across as knowing that behavior is a skill that they're in charge of? And then lastly, is that at the end of the day, at the end of the class period, did I provide a nurturing environment? Did the kids, even more importantly, did the kids provide a nurturing environment to one another? So although we can provide it, and we're teaching them those strategies, those kernels and cues, we also need to make sure that those same strategies and kernels and cues are done within the classroom, peer to peer, peer to adult, adult to adult. So are we modeling nurturing? Are we allowing our kids to do it? And when our kids are providing a nurturing environment to each other, are we actually saying something to them and reinforcing that? So when you see one student walk over and hand a beaker to another student, when you see one student help another student with a math problem, are you saying, thank you for helping them out? I really appreciate that. Really appreciate how you didn't talk while somebody else was presenting. I really appreciate how you listened to your partner. Those are ways we can provide that nurturing environment. So the three things, just look at those for a minute and get those in your head that you want at the end of each day with your classroom. Self-regulation, behavior as a skill set, and nurturing environment. Any questions on that?
There was a question in the chat from Jocelyn about how long would you say it takes to develop self-regulation?
Well, Jocelyn, it's tough. It's a slow process, right? And each group is different. But I always say don't rush it and don't have high expectations. But I think that self-regulation, you started at day one because you're starting it with a vision, right? You're teaching them those pieces and you go right into harmonica. I would say you probably won't see anything for probably 10 days, 2 full weeks of school. You might not really see that piece, but what you will see, you'll see small pieces. So as soon as you start the harmonica, PAX quiet, that should happen within a couple practice sessions. You should see that piece. But whether it's gone into muscle memory and truly self-regulation, and that where we can take it out of context from the classroom to recess, it takes it. I'm just estimating. I'd say a good 2 weeks before you'd actually see them backing off and thinking. But you have to, with these older kids, you really have to talk about it. You have to talk about them when they're like passing in the hallway, and somebody bumps into them. Give them scenarios and say, so do you just go off the handle? Hey, buddy, you come on. Or do you say, hey, no problem, because if you don't bring it to an awareness level and let their mind process it, they're not going to get it. If we just expect that they know what's happening, it's not, because we're not teaching it as a skill set. So as much as you can recognize, sorry, go ahead.
No, I guess I asked because you brought up the example of, when you had substitutes or somebody else, in your room, when you were teaching, and I see kind of the same thing in my classroom. And so I'm kind of wondering, can they learn self-regulation with one kernel and maybe not the other? And does that play into a bigger picture of, what happens when the teacher's not there? Somebody who's familiar, somebody who knows routine, somebody who, and how to deal with that with visitors or.
Right. So again, it takes a while. You have to bring it to an awareness level. You practice at and get different contexts. Like in your classroom, you wouldn't just always do it the same way. And before a visitor's coming into your classroom, you're going to do that prediction, right? And you're going to, in the prediction, you're going to talk about it. So, and in the prediction, I would use the word self-regulate. So we are having a visitor today. So what sort of things do we want to see more of that's going to show that we know how to self-regulate, right? Just like we use those words with second, third, fourth graders, we'll use them throughout. How are we going to, what sort of thing shows us that we're self-regulating? What sort of things shows us that we know that we're learning what behavior means? Use those terms so that it starts to sink in. Like with the first and second graders, we don't always say that. We do the more of, less of. But when you're in high school level, you can take it up a notch. In junior high, the fourth, fifth graders, we can take it up and start letting them hear it so that they start learning what they're doing. Because if we don't actually use that vocab and make it an awareness level, it just goes by and they don't understand. They don't understand why we get upset. They don't understand what's happening. So you definitely really encourage you to talk about it with them.
Hi, I'm Karen Garcia from El Camino Real Academy. Just a comment. The teachers from our school in second grade, they were talking about, oh my God, this is a great class. We never had that kind of students. What happened in first grade last year? Those kids are so kind. Very nice comments. And again, it's just PAX. We were following PAX, the kernels and everything. Like we set up goals. Like for example, we're gonna be focused just to working with PAX voices. When the kids know that what is the meaning and the purpose and everything, let's stop to PAX vision. And things like that, and it's working a lot. But the problem is we're doing everything, but it's no consistency from other grade levels. So they don't believe in us. So I know it's because my experience with PAX is wonderful. I have comments with when I was doing trainings during the school year, and I was absent, and I'm always receive wonderful comments about my class. Even if the class I'm doing this year has a lot of behavior problems. So kids learn self-regulation with PAX vision. Kids knows how to use it. Kids is just be consistent with the program, with the things. So that's my opinion about PAX. It's just that teachers needs to believe more about how that works.
Karen, thank you for sharing that. And you're 100% spot on. It is consistency. And we can only do as much as we can do in our classroom. And it's hard for us to control the other teachers, right, that don't want to do it. And Karen, I have heard wonderful things about your classroom, by the way. So yeah, so it makes it a little bit harder to become a PAX school if everybody's not doing it. And that's the difference in the primary and the upper grades as well, because I could go into, I'm in high schools, and in high schools, some of the teachers are doing it, and same with the junior highs and middle schools. Some teachers are doing it and some aren't. And all I can say there is that the teachers that are doing it, when those students are in their room, they're learning PAX. And hopefully they're able to take those pieces of self-regulation, the behavior, and that nurturing environment that they're learning from, and take it into the other classrooms and not be part of sometimes those distractions that happen. So in the science class, things go smooth, right? It's a PAX teacher. Then they move on to math, and it's not a PAX teacher. But hopefully you have enough of those kiddos that are learning self-regulation that they're able to model and self-regulate in the classroom. We don't have any solution for if teachers aren't going to use it, we could only do what we can do. But I 100% agree. You have to be consistent. And if you are consistent, you're going to see changes. And as Karen said, the kids that come up from first grade to second grade, those teachers are really fortunate to have PAX kids, because you can definitely see the kindness and the gentleness and that caring attitude, and they share. Big, big difference. Okay, thanks for sharing, Karen. I'm going to move on to the next slide. And so vision is the first one I'm going to talk about. And with vision, there are 3 things that I like to focus on that I think are essential that you might want to write down. And this is for upper grades. This also goes with primary. So those of you that are in primary. First thing is that all are actively involved in creating. And I mean all actively involved. I mean the teachers and the students. And so when you create your vision, 100% of them need to have a voice. Teacher also needs to say what they would like to see more of and what they would like to see less of. You have to identify your PAX behaviors and spleens with them as well. And then also in the upper levels, it's still a living document, just as it is with primary. And when I say living document, that means you have to feed it and water it, just like you do anything else that's living. And so if we make this beautiful vision and put it up on our wall, and we never water it and never feed it, it's gonna die out, right? If we water and feed it, which means weekly we go over and we look at it and we add to it and we pull out what we don't want anymore, it becomes this living document that is useful and helpful and makes a difference in our class and eliminates the chaos in our class. And we'll talk about how we actually make it with the upper grades. So how do I even start making it? So when I'm talking about upper grades for this one, I'm talking about people that are having several classrooms. So it could be a specials, but sixth grade if they rotate classrooms, seventh grade. I don't know I know fourth grade, Jocelyn, your kids don't, but sometimes in fifth grade even they might. So keep in mind this isn't one for just the 30 kids. This is one for teachers that rotate. So those of you that are partners that are working with classes, this should help you as well. So what I do as a partner, before I go in with the teacher and I help the teacher ahead of time if you have time, and we just get a big piece of butcher paper and I lay it down on the floor and I help him or her make the 4 categories. So we put up the see, hear, feel, do, we write more of, less of, and I get that situated for the teacher. So that's already done and we put it up on the wall. And then when the class comes in, prior to them even coming in, this big piece of paper is posted on the wall. Just helps the teacher out, shows them I support them. And then when the kiddos come in, I do just like I do with the elementary kids. I have every single student, because I think it's really, really essential that every student's voice is heard. And so if I just stand in front of the classroom as a teacher or a partner and say, okay, tell me what do you want to see more of, feel, hear more, you get those same kids. Even when I pull sticks, I feel like I'm not hearing everyone's voice. And for this activity, I want everyone's voice. So I have kids close their eyes, just like I do with the first graders, just I do with second, I do this with high school. Close your eyes and imagine the most wonderful classroom in the world. Think about in this classroom, and I do it in a very calm voice, think about in this classroom, what sort of things would you like to be doing? Of hearing, feeling, seeing. And then I have the kids open their eyes, and in the 4 categories on their paper, I have each student write down those things. And I give them plenty of time, about 10 minutes. And this activity does take the entire 50-minute class period. And so I also let my teachers know ahead of time that although we say PAX doesn't take more time, the vision does. It takes a whole class period. But it's better to front load, and the payoffs will be tremendous. And so they make their 4 columns, and I give them about 10 minutes to do it. And I'm monitoring and walking around so I can see if they're ready or not. And then I also provide examples to show for each column. And then I have them share it with a partner. And so if their partner can give them some suggestions and what they can share, whatever items they didn't have, they write them down. And then we share out as a class. And so then the kids, they're not caught off guard. Then I can draw sticks because they have stuff written down. I will call in volunteers. I call in non-volunteers. And we make sure that we're specific. So I guide students with questions. What exactly does respect look like? Tell me, if you're showing me respect, what would I see? Make sure it's very specific so that we're all in the same language. When you say be quiet, talk to me about that. What does that mean to be quiet? That it needs to be quiet in here. What do I mean? Do I always want it? What about when you're working in cooperative groups? What about when you're working in partners? And then sometimes I'll use sticks to call in students to share out as well as volunteers. So if this is period 1, I'm doing it, say in the color blue, right? But you say, Bev, you said there's so many classes. So after they've shared out, and I only do PAX behaviors first because it takes a long time. So then after they're finished sharing out and we're done, class period's over, bell's gonna ring in 5 minutes. I really appreciate you guys doing this vision. This is yours. This is to make your class run smooth. You guys, I really like how you guys all fed into this and helped me out. Give them a granny wacky prize. Class is over. I take paper and I cover it up. So my poster's up there. I take just plain copy paper, cover it up. My next class comes in. I do the exact same procedure. Take them through the wonderful classroom. They close their eyes. They open their eyes. They share with the partner. Then when it comes time for them to share out, I take off the pieces of paper from the one I did with first period. I have a green marker. First period was red. Now I have a green marker and I read what first period said. If you agree with what first period said, thumbs up. Okay, so second period, every time that second period agreed with what I had, I put a star in green. Star, star, star. Okay, second period, add. Now tell me what you have on your paper that they didn't have. And I add those in green. So second period's a star as an icon, and then they're also in green. I do that same thing with the third period. Third period might be blue and a smiley face. Fourth period might be brown and a check mark. Then at the end of the day, after everybody's responses are on there, I let them sign it, turn it over, we take it down, sign their name so that everybody shows they're in agreement. And then at each week we go to it. It doesn't matter that there's 7 classes up there. We go to it and we add stuff and we take stuff off. And maybe second period is like, no, we're still rocking in our chairs a lot. Maybe we should leave it up there. Then we leave it up there. Yeah, we're doing a great job of complimenting each other. We're doing a great job of listening when somebody else is presenting. So it's an easy thing to do. It takes, and then I come back in a few days and we do spleens, and spleens go much faster. the spleen part goes much faster. The part that I see forgotten a lot with vision, and I just want to hit on this really quick, is, as I said, if we don't feed and water it, it's no good. And so we have to make sure that we use that vision for predict. So kids are getting ready to do a 45-minute assignment out of their math book. Let's do a quick prediction. What kinds of things should we see? How do I know you're self-regulating when you're working for 45 minutes? Show me what's that going to look like? What sort of things are we going to avoid? What sort of behaviors can you control that we're going to avoid now? And then when they're working, this is the tough part, you guys, because this is what I see all the time. And I taught high school, so I know. You get them going on a project and you have so many things you need to do. You have papers to grade, you have stuff to turn into the office, all this whole stuff. So you want to just go sit at your desk and get that stuff done, because it's, you have lesson plans to make. But this is the point, you can't go sit at your desk to get stuff done. You need to monitor. You have to get up and do the monitoring, not just for academics, but for behavior. Give those pro-social statements to them. These kiddos, remember what I said, that their brain is still developing? And some of them, their brain is strengthening, some of them it's weakened, and it's pruning. These kids need that positive behavior, so pro-social behavior reinforcement more than even the little guys. You have to be telling them what they're doing correctly. They want to hear it. They need to hear it. I can't emphasize that enough. As much as you want to go sit at your desk and get stuff done, they really, and not call, you don't need to call them out in front of the class. They don't really like that, but go up to them and say, Michael, thank you so much I really appreciate your staying focused. I see you're self-regulating, you're working so hard. Good job. Keep at it. Go, Emily, thank you so much. I really like that you're using a soft voice and talking, the 3-inch voice and talking to your neighbor. I really appreciate that your partner and you are working together so quietly. I can't even hear you. Thanks, you guys. They need to hear it. Believe me, more than anybody. I can't even emphasize that as much as it needs to be. Research shows that the teenagers need positive reinforcement more than any other age group. And we forget it. We think that, oh, they're older, they don't need it. When I taught high school, my kids love stickers. My kids love when I stamp their page. I give them a heart sticker, a smiley face. They were thrilled. And so hearing you say something to them makes all the difference in the world. And then come back and reflect. At the end of the assignment, come back and reflect. Talk about what went well, and also talk about what behaviors were not as strong. It's really important to talk about where you saw people not self-regulating, and use those words again. And talk about how our classroom environment felt good. It was very nurturing. It felt good to be here today. What did you guys like about our classroom environment today? What was the culture in here today? Let them talk, and they will. These kids will talk, or let them jot a couple things down. Let them do a doodle, something, but really hit the predict, monitor, and reflect. Any questions on that? Okay, we're going to move on to PAX Quiet. This one, you guys, this is very similar to what we do in primary, but PAX Quiet works in high school. It works in junior high. It works in middle school. 5th graders and 6th graders are not too old to use PAX Quiet. It really is about, and this is kind of goes back to what Karen was talking about. It really comes back to how teachers bring it back to the class. So if you go to them and, you guys, I'm going to be blowing this silly thing because I have to, it's part of what we do, then they're going to think it's a silly thing and not really respect it. But if you go to them and say, hey, I just found out through research that there's a couple things that really work in getting your focus, and research shows that there's only 2 things that if you guys are working really hard and I need to talk to you and tell you something really important, there's 2 ways I can do it. Because if I just talk, you won't hear me. But if I either use chimes or blow this harmonica, that will tell your mind to stop and look at me. So we know that these are effective, and we know that science has shown this. And so blow it for them. And so when I blow this harmonica, all I want you to do is finish up the sentence. If you're with your partner working, finish up the sentence. If you're doing a math problem, just get to a quick stopping point and then look up and give me your attention. That's all I need you to do. I need to see your eyes. If you want to have them do the peace sign, you can. But if I am teaching and those kids look at me and give me their eyes as high school kids, I am happy. And usually with the high school and the older kids, I get a faster response and I get a higher percentage of them doing it right away. It's just a lot. It's very, very effective in high school and junior high and middle school. So I teach the procedure. I tell them what I want them to do. I model it, and then we practice it. I have them do different things, and then I blow it different places around the room. I thank them right away. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate you giving me your attention and getting quiet right away. Reinforce those pro-social behaviors. And I provide that wait time so I'm not frustrated, right? I blow it. It doesn't matter to me if it takes 15 seconds. Really, let them finish what they're doing. Just like you would like to finish a sentence, let them finish the sentence. Just stand there and wait. And then they'll look up and they'll give you their eyes. It works. And use it to give directions. So what I like to say is when you have the kids, say in middle school, they're all working really, really hard on a poem. And so 100% of the students are focused, they're working on their poem, they're writing, maybe they're working with their partner, and they're doing, 100% are doing what you want them to do. But you forgot to tell them something. How often does that happen? It happens a lot. You give directions and then, I forgot to tell you to do it in blue. Or I forgot to tell you to stop at this page. So they're all focused working. You blow your harmonica. They stop. They look up at you. Thank you so much, you guys. I forgot to tell you, I need you to do the second paragraph in blue, the third paragraph in red. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that. If you go back to the old method where they're working 100% of them focused, and you remember, I forgot to tell them that. Oh, you guys, I forgot to tell you the second paragraph's in red and the third's in blue. How many of those kids do you think heard you? Research shows it's about a third, only a third, because your human voice doesn't break through their concentration level. A harmonica does. And tell them that, let them know that. Any questions on PAX Quiet? Okay, we're gonna go on to Granny Wacky Prizes. I love Granny Wacky Prizes with the older kids. They love it. They love just the idea of winning. And so sometimes to them, it doesn't even matter if there's a prize, but we want to encourage the Granny Wacky Prize because that's the piece that's teaching self-regulation and it's giving them that needed break. Some teachers tell the kids why it's called a Granny Wacky Prize. Others just give them the purpose why we're doing it. I always tell them that it's a brain break as well. It's a time for them just to loosen up, let their brain relax and recover, and then come back. It's also a time to see if they can be in this way period of excitement and then settle back down. And then you might talk to them. So when in life would you get that way? When would you be like really hyped up and then need to come back down? And there's different situations, right? That they might be really hyper and then they have to come back down. Maybe they're doing a basketball game at lunch and then they have to come in and do math. There might be times at their job where they're doing something that they're really, really involved, but then they have to settle back down. So there's times, or maybe they're they go to college and they go off to a party and they're having a great time at a party and everybody starts drinking and they have to make that decision whether or not they're going to participate in that or whether they're going to settle back down and do something different. So bring it to real life situations so they understand that. And logistically speaking, I know that when you guys read the manual and stuff, it says to try to do like 5 or 6 of these a day. So when you teach older kids, you want to make it spontaneous, not just after a game. But I say logistically, if you can aim for at least 1 during a 50-minute period, it's good. And so as I said, when we did that vision activity, at the end of vision, they did such a great job, I gave them a Granny Wacky Prize. If they come in from, they're coming in, they get started on their bell work right away, from passing period, they get started on their bell work right away, that's a really good time to say, you guys, I appreciate it. I'm looking around and 100% of you have already started your bell work and the bell just rang. So I really appreciate that. Let's do a quick Randy Wacky prize. Maybe you're getting ready to do a long assignment where they're going to have to write, maybe they're doing resumes. And so you guys are going to be working on this resume, and I really appreciate how you listened to me during going over each section of it. Let's do a quick Granny Wacky prize before you sit down and work independently. I call them prizes. And some people call them the Granny Wacky prize. I just call them prizes. Here are some that I like for secondary level. They really like just a minute to be able to talk to their friend about anywhere. You can say, stand up, go talk wherever you want. Guided relaxation, if you're comfortable doing that. We use a lot of slates and markers, and we are very strict with our slates and markers in the classroom. And so you could do a minute where they can do whatever they want with their slate and marker. They like silent ball or pulling out a beach ball and passing that around. They like to take a nap for a minute. They really go and will do that in a heartbeat. I'll say, oh, you guys are looking kind of sleepy. Let's go ahead and take a nap for a minute. And then I let them come up with stuff. The bottle flip, we hear a lot about that, how kids really like that. I like that. It just is stuff you have to have ready. And for all of the kids to have bottles, and bottles that don't leak and squeak and stuff, they have fun with it. I was telling the other group, I did air hockey with them. I used this pinch slate cards, the ABCD cards, as the goals, and each kid, they put their chairs together. So one could have one pinch slate at one end and the other at the other end, and then I gave them cotton balls, and those were the goals, and they had to blow the cotton ball into the other person's pinch slate to score a point. They enjoyed that. Thumb or arm wrestle, they like to do that, hit the doorway. I'll let them come in. They got started really nice on their bell work. They can go around the class and do high fives. They like it. Garbage can basketball. Couple big ones too that are favorites is the 5 minutes to write notes for an upcoming exam. You guys have been working really hard. We're gonna stop here. I really appreciate how you gave me attention while you were taking notes, and go ahead now and take those notes. I'm going to give you an index card, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write any notes for the exam on Friday, or 1 minute notes for an open book test. So those are kind of things that they really respond well to as well. Any questions on Granny Wacky? Okay, and then the last one is Toodles, and I put this picture up here because I work at a at-risk high school, and I'm the PAX partner there, and on Valentine's we are doing a Toodle board, and the kids really respond well to Toodles at high school. We do call them Toodles, although people say, oh, our 6th graders think that's really babyish name and stuff. You know what? High school kids, middle school kids, we call them Toodles, and again, I think it's how it's presented. I just say, here, we're doing Toodles, and it's the opposite for tattle, and they love it. And we also do a Toodle assembly with the middle school and the high school kids, where their crew leaders write everybody. So you might have a crew of like 15, and the crew leaders write everybody Toodles. They pass them out at the assembly so everybody gets one. They do where students write to students. This particular school has 85 kids, so it's not real big, but it works, and they love it, and it's a really nice way to recognize them. I also talk about the importance of Toodles, of notes to each class when I go into these kids' rooms. I talk about how sometimes we feel sad and have days that we're depressed. I talk about how some kids have been suicidal, and we know that one note can make a huge difference in saving somebody's life, and how one note can cheer somebody up. And I say, think to yourself for a minute, have any of you guys ever felt sad or just had a bad day? And how does it feel when somebody would come up and give you a special note? If you're having a really good day, even if you're having a great day, it makes a difference. So Dr. Mose is the man. He's the researcher that came up with the research that shows that just one note in somebody's life can save their life. And I talked about this last time. There was a guy that was on the Golden Gate Bridge and was going to jump off, and he said, because he was, you know, just really depressed and stuff, and said, if just one person will come up to me and say something positive to me, I'm not going to jump. And this was Dr. Moses' research. And this lady comes up to him, and the man was feeling like really relieved because he didn't really want to jump. And the lady comes up to him and said, oh, will you take my picture? And so the guy ends up jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, survives, and then goes on to tell his story about how one note would have made all the difference in the world. And now he travels around to schools and just speaking about how the importance, and they're not called toodles for him. They're just the importance of a note. And I also tell the story of, we have a 30-year-old man that when he was in 3rd grade got a toodle. And he still to this day will pull his toodle out of his wallet and share it with people. So when I talk about toodles with the older kids, I say, make it wallet worthy. You know, make it something that somebody will want to keep for 20 or 30 years and carry it in their wallet. So I bring an example of a pre-written toodle. I don't just try to do it at the spur of the moment when I'm a partner and go into a classroom and teach it. I have a couple examples. I usually have one example that's very strong and then another one that's very weak. Because sometimes what we see happening with these kids that aren't really rational in what they think and sometimes don't make the right decisions. Sometimes when they write toodles, they don't quite make the right decision in the way they write the toodle. And so their word selection's not really that great. They'll say, I really like you even though you're really sarcastic at times, or really like you even though you never shut up in class. And so we have to pre-read these, and by me providing a word selection on the board, it helps them out. By me giving an example and a non-example helps them out. And then as they're writing it, as the partner, I walk around and I encourage the teacher to walk around and read them. I list the steps on the board, and then if the students want to share them, they share them, and if they don't want to, they don't have to. And I'll tell you what, I don't think I've been in any class with the older kids starting from 5th grade up that they haven't shared and it hasn't made me cry. They are so heartwarming ones, and so just to hear the toodles that these kids write to each other, it brings tears to your eyes. They're so sincere. And the steps I put on the board just so the kids can look up at them. I have them put the recipient's name on the toodle. So what I'll do is I'll pre-write the name on all of them. And then, so I just do them at random, and I say, you're just going to get a random toodle. If it's not your BFF, guess what? That's okay, because you can find things to write about. And we talk about that. And then I just hand them out and make sure everybody has one. So they put the recipient's name where it says dear. And then I have them write 3 to 5 sentences. And then I have them sign the toodle with their name. Go back and reread and make sure you were specific, kind, and meaningful. And then wait for the directions. And then they can share them out. And then you can ask them if they want to put them up on a board in the classroom. Most of them like to take them with them. They like to take the toodle with them. And when you say, how many of you were surprised with what they wrote to you? Everybody raises their hand. And how many of you felt good? Everybody raises their hand. And they're not doing it because they have to. They're doing it because they want to. So that's my presentation.